Welcome to What the Hype, and more importantly, welcome back to the Valley, bitch, to quote one of my favorite lines from the series finale, at least for right now, of Cobra Kai. I'm Micah, joined by Pam. We last talked about Cobra Kai a few months ago in November, and now here we are in February, and we have gotten the finale, not just to the season, not just to season 6, but to the series overall.
Yeah, we got the final 4 episodes. So last time we spoke, there was still, this big cliffhanger in the works. And I think we kind of theorized a little bit about what the end would look like, but we're here on the other side now, which is exciting and also kind of sad. We both have enjoyed this series for its run. So, it's always sad when things end, but it's also nice when a show gets a chance to wrap everything up. And I think that you can tell with these final 4 episodes and with the season overall that they really did try to wrap up all the loose ends. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree. And similar to what you just said, I'm really going to miss this show. This is one of those shows that I think is just so well written. It was written for fans by fans, and you could really tell the creators of the show, the cast really enjoyed what they were doing. I've seen a lot of kind of interviews and the little post show that they do on Netflix for Cobra Kai. There's just the nostalgia factor. Of course, we've talked about that, but it's just, there's something that's captivating about this show. There's a reason why it's drawn so many people in, and I think that the finale delivered, and I'm sure there'll be some people maybe that were hoping for more of a cliffhanger than what was given, but there's also something to be said for wrapping up a show and leaving it. And it doesn't mean there can't be future opportunities, but this was written in a way that I think you could feel comfortable with after 6 solid seasons.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm super excited to get into some of the specifics with you as well, because there is so much to talk about, and we're probably going to stick to the bigger plot points here. But with that in mind, we do want to remind you all that there's a huge spoiler warning here. The show dropped the final 4 episodes last Friday, right? We're recording a little under a week before, but this will be out about a week after. So if you haven't watched the final 4 episodes, just take a breather, go do that. And you can come back and join us after, because we're not we don't want to be responsible for ruining anything that you all haven't seen. So
definitely, yeah. Feel like we're back in the days of when we were doing Mugglecast, and book 6 had just come out, and we had to be very careful about the things that we were talking about. So we always issued a spoiler warning atop the show, but definitely encourage people, if they've been on the ride this long, to go check out those final 4 episodes before listening to this episode. But with that said, I think we can jump right in, right?
Yeah, let's do it. So was there ever a doubt in your mind that the Sakai, what is it? Sakai Taikai? Is that how they pronounce it?
You got to say it like the guy says it.
How does he say it?
Well, no, he always does it in this deep voice and, announcery, but
let me hear your best impression.
Oh, I have to do it?
Yeah, let me hear your best impression of this guy that I have no recollection of.
Oh, no. I'm talking about the head of the Sakai Takai.
Oh, yeah. He does take his job very seriously.
He does. He even kicks one of the members of the All Valley gymnasium. Is that I couldn't really tell. That was actually Sports a moment we could talk about Center. Too, because that was very corporate America, when they were all sitting around the table talking about the fact that the tournament is now going to be taking place in the Valley, which by the way, kudos to you, because you predicted that in our episode back in November. You said you thought that what better way for it to all come to an end than for it to end up in the Valley. So, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
Yeah, that was also a nice callback to the earlier seasons as well, having that same All Valley sports committee deliberating over rules and such, because we saw Johnny and Daniel have to deal with that corporate bullshit in terms of just getting the regular All Valley tournament back up and running after everything that happened. So Yeah, it was kind of like a fun little callback, I think, for fans to see that. And we saw the showrunners do that quite a bit over the course of these last 4 episodes specifically. There were a lot of nice little callbacks to previous moments and past seasons of the show.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
I also watched that the after show as well. And I don't think like it necessarily registered in the same way that they mentioned it, but the showrunner said that they also like made sure that like even the mats were replicated from the original Karate Kid movies
the red mats.
for
Yeah.
yeah, the red mats, which I was like, they look familiar, but I didn't click why. And I thought that that was really cool too.
There are a lot of full circle moments in this kind of, what would you say, part 3 of season 6. And
Yeah.
to that end, we see that with everything coming back to the valley, going all the way back to 1984, the fight between Daniel and Johnny. This is Johnny's full circle moment, right? In the valley. Again, it's not the all valley tournament. It's the Sakai Takai, but it's his moment to be able to claim victory, something that he felt was taken away from him in many ways all the way back in Karate Kid. And so we'll talk more about that, but there were also some full circle moments for some of our favorite villains, maybe no longer viewed in some cases as villains. But let's start by talking about Silver
Mm.
and some of the reasoning behind why he wanted this tournament to play itself out. We learn in these last few episodes that he is dying. He seems to have some sort of chronic illness that has resurfaced, that he's not going to really probably make it more than another few months, according to what we learn. And I think in the conversation with Daniel and Johnny, he's very open and honest, which is something that we don't see quite often from him as a character. He talks about how, he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have children. This is really all he has, and so winning this tournament is sort of a last hurrah for him. And we know that he'll go to pretty much any ends in order to achieve victory.
Yeah, it really puts him into perspective as this big bad in a way that I think he doesn't get the context of beforehand, because he just really is like down this slippery slope super fast from the moment that he comes back to like the moment that we realize that he's been playing this nice guy act just to usurp Kreese and take over Cobra Kai, right? But the fact that he just like, it kind of felt like he was never worried about any ramifications of what he was doing. It just didn't really make much sense, but it does make a lot of sense in the context of the fact that he literally has nothing left to lose at this point. So he might as well just go down swinging.
Absolutely. And while pretty much all the other senseis have doubts considering what happened at the end of season 6, part 2, he's really the only one that could kind of restart things. I don't really think that if you're looking around at the other senseis, that there was really a strong desire. Of course, ultimately, all of them have to be on board for this to, come back to the valley and for this tournament to continue. But it when this kind of third part of season 6 starts, it seems like most people have moved on. That people have put in the Sakai Takai behind them, and as devastating as the death of that character was, they've been able to process it in a way. We actually even see part of the funeral that takes place for this individual. So uh, but we all know that in order for this show to ultimately reach its conclusion, that this tournament is going to have to come back, and we're going to have to finish it in some way, shape or form. And there's a lot of moving parts to this, because there are players who are missing and people who decide not to fight. So I'm curious kind of what you thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, like when we just look at like the newer generation, right? So like the kids, 100% it makes sense that Tori would have doubts because she has always felt like, she never really belonged anywhere. And with Kreese seemingly out of the picture from the beginning, and with her really feeling like karate never quite leads to anything good in her life, it would make sense why she decides to quit until Sam comes back and says that, they should train together. And I think that's such a great moment for them. Watching like their reconciliation over the course of like basically almost the entire series has been one of like the nicer, like really nicely rounded out storylines that we've gotten as far as the kids go as well. And so for it to be Sam that's encouraging her to fight when Sam was so scared to fight with against her in any way, shape, or form for the longest time really shows the growth there as well.
Ultimately, her decision to step aside to allow Sam to advance, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
to allow Tori to advance in the
Yeah.
tournament. I think that was a big decision.
And a big decision for Daniel too, because I think that like everybody is kind of has like some selfish motives here, and his selfish motive has always been that he really feels like Miyagi Do is the best way forward, and he thinks that that is the best like exemplary version of karate that like everybody should aspire to. But the fact that he's reached a point where he realizes that um, the Cobra Kai method is not bad in the right hands, and he's willing to forfeit in order to let Johnny go forward with Tori and Miguel is like that's really big too for
Right.
his character.
Which is another kind of huge surprise here. And I guess something we probably should have anticipated is that Cobra Kai was going to return in some capacity. Not maybe the way that we would have expected it with how things ended at the end of the second part of last season, but the way that it was set up to have Sam facing Tori to advance to the finals, and Sam making that decision to forego it, and then of course you have the fight between Robbie and Axel, and him making or not, he didn't make any decisions. The injury that ultimately that he suffers, kind of leaves a clear path for Iron Dragon to win at least the male side of the Sakai Takai, because there is nobody waiting in the wings for Cobra Kai. So that decision to kind of bring back Cobra Kai, and the reasoning being really because all of these kids at one point or another were members of Cobra Kai, so they can fight on its behalf. And that's where you see Tori and Miguel be chosen by Johnny, and I'm sure had the blessing from Daniel to fight in the finals. And so
Mm-hmm.
now Axel does in fact have a opponent in Miguel, and Tori faces off against social media maven. That's what I like to call her.
I never remember her name either. Yeah, and all of that too gets put into motion because Kreese and Johnny have this really touching reconciliation moment and wonderful acting on both their parts as well. In this really touching scene where you really start to get to the root of why Johnny has spiraled and hasn't had a lot of luck in life. It obviously goes beyond just the fact that he lost a tournament at as a teenager. It is just deeply rooted in feeling like he was abandoned by the only father figure he's ever known. But the fact that Kreese is really like able to give him this too, and fully transfer Cobra Kai ownership over to him so that he can go forth and beat Iron Dragon and Silver. It's a really nice moment for both of them.
Yeah, I think it would definitely make a few people tear up watching that scene, and as you said, they did an amazing job. The sort of the resistance on Johnny's part initially to embrace Kreese, but then finally the two of them releasing what has clearly been decades of emotion in that moment was certainly something to watch. And I think that for Kreese, this whole Cobra Kai series has been a redemptive arc, like you said, but it's also been the same thing for Johnny. I think there's a lot of characters that you can point to that redemption is a quality that has really played itself out throughout the course of this series. And for Kreese, eh, he really realizes the error of his ways after Quan dies, in the finale, and he realizes the way that Cobra Kai is being taught is really not the right way, and he recognizes what he's done to Johnny, and yeah, he's been that father figure role for him, or he was early on in his life, and Johnny just felt completely abandoned in that moment. He says as much, that it wasn't even the physical aspect of it; it was the fact that Kreese just kind of left him in that parking lot, and he felt more abandoned probably than he ever did. And it's so cool to kind of see the human aspect, not just to Kreese, but to Johnny. We see that with him going to visit, his mother's grave, with the birth of his daughter. He's a family man now, so there's a lot of different like threads that you could really pull on here with this character.
For sure.
Well, we are going to talk a little bit more about Kreese and his redemption and how things play out with Silver on a yacht in the what would technically that be? Where were they sailing? And somewhere in the
Uh,
Pacific.
yeah, they're on the Pacific Ocean for sure.
But we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. So I wanted to ask you though, did you feel for Kreese in that moment? Is he fully validated now in your eyes, not just for what he does in terms of embracing Johnny, not just for handing over Cobra Kai, but for making sure that Silver doesn't go through with his plans to essentially threaten Johnny's family? Because we know Silver will do anything in order to win this tournament. Kreese clearly recognizes this. He said he saw something in his eyes, or he recognized, that kind of that flair that Silver has for doing these types of things. So I'm curious, does Kreese walk away from Cobra Kai the series no longer a villain?
I think so. And I think the reason why this works for me as a redemption arc is because you as a viewer walk away feeling like he made the choices for the right reasons, because he understands now that everything he thought was a sign of weakness is not a sign of weakness. The motivation there is pure. Um, it's funny because I think you're right. I think like in a lot of ways, just like with Johnny, Cobra Kai has been set up as a redemption arc for Kreese's story. But for a while while the series was starting up, I wasn't really sure if that's where they were going, or if they were just showing us the Kreese backstory in an effort to have us, sort of have like sympathy for the devil, if you will. Because I think that a lot of reboots and revivals and origin stories these days exist in an effort to do that, especially if they focus on a villain, right? They just want you to say, like, to understand, well, like this person is bad, but they're a byproduct of their circumstances. But sometimes you feel like a character can't quite be redeemed. And I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't like fully interested in all of the Kreese backstory when they first started serving it up to us, because I was just like, well, like I can see kind of what they're doing here. So for me, I think the full redemption was a little bit of a surprise, just because I wasn't sure if they could actually get there with this character ever, or if he was just going to stay evil the whole time, especially because there was so much back and forth as well.
Yeah, you didn't necessarily know if you were going to get that final payoff, to your point, and you most
Mm-hmm.
certainly do, because he steps in and really, this was actually alluded to in an earlier episode with Chosen, when he's getting his tarot card read, and Death shows up, and there's a mention of two people that he knows who are close to him dying. Now, it would to be assumed that it probably would have been people who were closer to Chosen than Silver and Kreese, but we do get that kind of prophecy come true. So I was constantly kind of going through different possibilities in my head as
Ooh,
to
like who's going to die?
who's going to die, because they just, they kill Quan at the end of the last season, and he wasn't necessarily a good guy, but he was still a kid. So I'm thinking to myself, would they really go there again? But then you have, you know, Axel and Robbie's fight, and you're not sure what's going to happen there. And then you have Axel and Miguel, and it's, what clear direction he's been given as it relates to Miguel's spine. So yeah, I really didn't know who it was going to be, but then, we get that in the kind of the payoff of the penultimate episode.
Yeah, it also just seems like such a like an 80s action movie move to have them blow them, like the yacht blow
Well,
up with the two guys. You know what I mean?
because the question would be no bodies, right?
Right.
I was almost wondering in like the credits, were you going to get like a hand coming out of the water? You don't know if it's Kreese
Like
or
one of them
Silver.
survived and you're not sure who.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was, cheesy, but also fitting for Kreese's last word to be mercy. This is a nice little play on like the no mercy. And,
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of driving home the point that he's fully like changed,
Right. And I love the fact that he used his cigar kind of as the signature move to blow up the boat.
He was also kind of like just killing people left and right at the end. So as soon as like the gasoline spilled, I was like, they're both dead, because he killed the henchman and he was like, all right, we're going to have one final battle.
Right.
So
was that satisfying for you, though? You felt like that was a good ending for both Kreese and Silver? And
I guess I just like, I didn't think they were going to like, it was going to be like this whole murder suicide situation. But I also kind of feel like Silver was never going to stop until he died, like he is just like they built him into that sort of character. So in that regard, it makes sense that like somebody had to kill him, because that, stretching it out until he just died naturally of whatever illness he had wouldn't have made sense for the story arc. So I think, yeah, it served its purpose as far as giving Kreese redemption. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe it does make sense for him to go out swinging, and also to go out the way he did, because so much of his story is wrapped up in the time he spent in the war,
mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of feel like they gave him a soldier's death in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would say defending his chosen family in Johnny, and now Johnny's wife and daughter, it was clear that was going to be who Silver was going to target here, and for Kreese to play almost a father-like role in defending Johnny's family, I think is definitely a validation of his character, at least at the very end of this series. If we go back to the person that he was earlier on, I mean, we could talk about him really being the big bad for most of this until Silver showed up. But yeah, it was a really powerful way for him to go out, and I don't it'd be very hard to survive that.
I know,
but you never know.
That's true.
Maybe he has a little bit of Michael Myers in him. But let's go back and talk a little bit more about the kids here. They Cobra Kai really sweeps the tournament and they all emerge victorious, Tori, Miguel, and then ultimately Johnny, which, that was probably the bigger surprise of the entire finale, is that he was going to be the one who was ultimately going to have to win for Cobra Kai. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, this ties back to the All Valley tournament in 1984. And, you know, it's Daniel who ultimately, I mean, Daniel had a lot of good speeches in these couple of episodes, but the way he just kind of gets in Johnny's face and, speaks to him as only Johnny can understand. That was another nice kind of full circle moment for their friendship, and almost Daniel behaving in the way Johnny would.
Yeah, yeah. And Chosen even says that too. He's like, you're the only one who understands him.
Right.
Like, so yeah, it was cool to kind of see him take on Johnny's like what Johnny would refer to as like a badass persona, because it's so not like Daniel to say anything like that, So yeah, I thought that was great. I also thought it was great that they all became Cobra Kai in the end. I think that was a nice way to also showcase the camaraderie that now exists. I liked
Definitely.
the training montage too with Johnny and Daniel.
Oh
A
yeah,
true
let's talk
80s
about that.
training montage.
Like a Rocky. I mean, Rocky does get
Yeah.
referenced in these episodes too. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I also really enjoyed how they took the Sakai Takai and made it this big sporting event. And they had Kevin Burkhardt in there as one of the announcers, who is a big sports broadcaster, and the way that they were just kind of hyping this whole thing up, and you definitely got like a modern day vibe to it. Now it was going to be broadcast all over the world, and it was almost like ESPN was there, but there are a lot of like fun elements to these episodes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really brought the idea of the All Valley tournament into the 21st century with that, because, in the original movies came out the mid 80s, early 80s or something like
Yeah,
that, the first one. And so it would make sense that like that was a big deal for the Valley and for maybe greater Los Angeles, right? Like something for everybody to go and check out. Just kind of like, if everybody gets into like the local high school football team and like are invested in their season, I consider it to be something like that. But in today and age in 2025, it would make sense for something like the Sakai Kai to be like a viral moment, or for people to be interested because maybe they saw like some clip on social media, and so then they all want to see what's going on and stuff like that.
definitely. And talking a little bit about the social media aspect of it, we have one participant who is very much all about her social media. And that kind of goes back to talking a little bit more about the kids, because in a lot of ways, their fights do take a back seat to the storyline with Johnny and Kreese and Silver and Daniel and Johnny, and then of course Johnny's fight right at the very end. And so I mean, that's just how I felt. I'm curious if you felt the same way. I mean, they were almost used as a plot device. As we were talking earlier
Yes.
about how some were deciding to step aside, one was getting injured, and ultimately, because everything ends in a tie, that is what prompts Johnny ultimately to have to fight on behalf of Cobra Kai against Wolf from Iron Dragon, who's just an absolute asshole, and probably
Mm-hmm.
could be in very many ways compared to Kreese with the way that he treats Axel, and you can make comparisons even with Axel and Johnny, right? Like, were they giving us a little bit more of that in that particular scene? But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in a lot of ways, yeah, like the whole point of the Sakai Takai was to build up to Johnny's redemption. So he's kind of like the true Karate Kid, if you will, to make reference back to How I Met Your Mother, or Barney's always like, he's the real Karate Kid. He's like the one, but I will say that I think that the only other fight that they really put a lot of emphasis on was Miguel's against Axel. And I would only say that because they had a lot of these flashbacks incorporated, but I think that that makes a lot of sense because in so many ways, Miguel and Johnny's stories are completely intertwined. And he's really the reason why Johnny starts Cobra Kai back up. Miguel is his first student, and Miguel is really like his success. And he's also such a good example of, somebody that can, like Johnny can come back from, the like maybe like Kreese's rendition of Cobra Kai teachings and still turn out to be a good person. Cause we do see Miguel kind of go dark as well for a minute there, but he ends up, coming back from that. And I think that that is done to prove that like a lot of these kids that like end up being like evil for a minute because of their involvement with Cobra Kai come back as a result of, showcasing that it's not really like, it's not necessarily the karate. It's the person that's like teaching you like the values and, so yeah, I think that it makes sense that they would put more emphasis on that. And I think that like the flashbacks were really nice. It's like a nice tribute to the series as a whole. It's good for fans as well. I think it was like good, an example of good fan service, especially for newer fans. And you really kind of get a sense of like how much time has really passed since this series started because all the kids he looks like a little baby.
And really for Miguel too, there's a part of it that is him fighting for himself, but also for his half brother in Robbie and for what has happened to him in the previous fight against Axel. And one of the things that I found that was just so well done in what you were just describing was the choreography, right? To be able to stage this fight between Miguel and Axel, but also intertwine those flashbacks so the moves are almost identical.
Yeah. And he realizes like how much he's learned and how that his knowledge can help him. That was
sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing that, I would add in here too is just showing how performing under immense moments of pressure, the slightest thing can affect you. And we see that happen really across the board, right? In terms of people getting into other people's heads, right? The situation with Tori and social media Maven, where she's basically that's her name from now on. I've decided really just teasing her about what happened in Barcelona, the fact that she hooked up with Robbie and their little fling that they had. And then for Miguel, it playing in the back of his mind is just finding out that Sam has been accepted to this program in Okinawa. And this happens literally just minutes before he's about to fight. Johnny has Wolf like basically just completely de-pants him in the locker room, verbally and physically before they go out to fight. So there's and even Axel to some extent, he chooses not to go through and do what he does to Miguel because he looks over and sees Sam, and so all these different things that are playing inside of these kids' mind as they're getting ready to, have these fights, is definitely something that I picked up on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it that the fact that they focus as much on the mental as well as the physical is done really, really well.
Yeah. Should we look up social media Maven's name?
I was doing that as you were talking, but I was trying to go by episode and I don't see her listed here.
Uh-oh. Well, we'll figure that out by the end of this episode for sure. But while we do that, we're going to take a quick break and then go through a few odds and ends and then get into any kind of final criticisms that we had of the finale and what, if anything, does the future hold for this franchise.
So we've conferred with our fact checkers, aka me, and she has a very social media name. Her name is Zara.
Okay.
Like
So
Zara
social
sounds like
media
if she
maven
would
is
be
totally appropriate.
an influencer.
But some odds and ends, Pam, I know you wanted to touch on.
Yeah. So, just very quickly, we did get one last flashback with Mr. Miyagi. I wanted to know what you thought about this. I thought it was kind of cool that they brought in basically like that's the first, like they evoke the images of like the first time Daniel ever really met him
Mhm.
or like saw his karate skills.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I I always have like some reservations about AI
Me
and
too.
bringing back people and characters that are no longer with us. I think that maybe there was a way to do it where you didn't even need to show his face. You would just know that it was Mr. Miyagi who was fighting alongside him. And of course, you could use AI and other technology to make his voice come through. But I was fine with it. It was basically Daniel getting permission to not fight any further in the
Mhm.
Sakai Takai.
I agree. I understand why they did it. You know, I know that it probably was just to honor Pat Morita, who has been since passed. You know, Mr. Miyagi is such a huge figure in not only this franchise, but in pop culture overall.
Sure.
But it is kind of like Uncanny Valley whenever you see them try to do this kind of like AI. You can always kind of see something a little bit wrong with it. And yeah, I think that like maybe it would have played better if it had just been, you know, like the fighting sequence because you didn't really have to see his face. You can easily slot in somebody that is of similar stature and then maybe like Daniel could have just heard his voice through the fog or something with the advice, but it always gets a
Right.
little tricky when they decide to recreate the whole face and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
and Daniel's actually a character that we haven't talked much about in this episode, but also for him, this is very much a full circle series, right? And him
oh
coming to
yeah.
terms with the fact that even Mr. Miyagi is flawed on some level, and we do learn the truth behind the story of the violent robbery that he was supposedly involved in, and we get a little bit more closure there. But I think it's to me it's one of those messages that um a lot of times you learn in life the people that you look up to, whether they're your parents, whether they're other adult role models, that they have flaws just like the next person, and they're human just like anybody else. And I think
Yeah.
that was a message that was trying to be conveyed here for Daniel about Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, and he even here like so for anybody that maybe doesn't remember what the necklace actually comes back literally because it turns out Daniel's mom has had it this whole time because Mr. Miyagi gave it to her to give to Sam. And she starts telling this story about how Mr. Miyagi's wife died in a concentration camp. We had Japanese concentration camps in America. Um, and when she was in the concentration camp, one of the guards stole the necklace from her, and so Mr. Miyagi went and took it back. And Daniel says he did what he had to do, and I think that him coming to terms with that and understanding that like it maybe wasn't the right choice, like morally, but it was the choice that he felt like was best at the time
Right.
is huge. But I think the other big lesson that Daniel really learns over the course of this whole series is that people can change. And that's such a big one because over the course of these 6 seasons, Daniel and Johnny really have this back and forth, back and forth. A lot of times they take, you know, one step forward and 2 steps back. And Daniel's really quick he kind of has a short fuse, you know, he's really quick to just assume the worst. And he's really quick to go back and throw into Johnny's faces like, I thought you've changed, but it turns out you haven't. And so I think that, you know, Daniel being the one to make sure that he gets the original Cobra Kai dojo back for Johnny, like was such a nice way to kind of tie that up and to really cement the fact that, you know, these two are in a good place now and they're going to stay in a good place. And he's really come to terms with the fact that Johnny has turned over a new leaf, that he's not the person that he thought he was. And that also like Cobra Kai is not all evil, which is huge. Like that's the big jump from
Right.
like the Daniel we meet in like the first season versus the one that we get at the end.
Totally. And I think that for Johnny, you know, the fact that as part of this new Cobra Kai, he's integrating Miyagi-Do into his teachings, that would have never happened going all the way back to the beginning of this show. And he even recognizes it in kind of that final scene where he says, you know, defense is not my thing, basically. I'm all about offense, but you will learn defense from Daniel and Miyagi-Do. And we see some scenes of some of the members of Cobra Kai doing kind of the wax on, wax off, the painting, the clipping of the bonsai trees. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like these two worlds are fusing together. And I think that ties in nicely to what you're saying about Daniel recognizing that people can actually change. And I don't think there's a character that changed more throughout the course of this series than Johnny Lawrence.
Yeah, yeah. And also like we get like the last bit of that too when in the final scene where they're at the bar together and they're talking about both dojos competing in the All Valley tournament, but they're still planning it together, you
Right.
know, and saying like, "Oh, I think that like oh my god, I just blanked on her name. The well anyway, so they're like swapping students and saying like I think that this person should like be more on the defense. So like she should fight for Miyagi-Do. He's like, oh, I think that this person should be more aggressive. So like he should fight for, you know, Cobra Kai and the fact that it's all in good fun and it's like they're like it's a friendly situation and they're, you know, set to compete separately, but it's not the be all end all is a really nice way to leave it as well.
Right. Yeah. And even in that the preceding scene before it goes to the credits with Johnny, he's back to acting like himself, the Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence that we know, the way he's talking to the kids, the language that he's using. But I think
Yeah.
he's almost been freed in a way to do that because he has had this redemptive arc. And we know that deep down he has a good heart. So regardless of how he might be treating these new kids in the moment, we know that they're going to be, you know, instructed properly. And then we also kind of see the real Johnny come through in that bar moment where Daniel is trying to catch the fly with his chopsticks and Johnny just comes in and goes like that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I think that was a nice way for them to end the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Nice little callback and just like a nice little reminder of like the fact that these are two different people, but they've figured out how to come together and be friends. So
Yeah. Two
yeah,
different
very nice.
mindsets about how to
Yeah,
achieve
for
the same
sure.
goal,
It's like
basically,
one is
right?
patience and one is like act first, think
Yeah,
later.
totally. All right. Well, before we kind of talk a little bit about what the future may hold for Cobra Kai and Karate Kid, was there any criticisms that you had of the finale?
I guess my only criticism of the final season is that I'm not quite sure it needed to be 15 episodes. And I can't believe I'm saying that because I feel like I'm always trying to champion for longer seasons. I hate the 8 season model that's kind of become the norm. But I also kind of feel like with Cobra Kai specifically, I was thinking back to what you said too about how the kids were really kind of more of a vessel. I don't know if we needed like some of those middle episodes. I think we could have cut like maybe like I don't know if we needed like Quan to die, for example, for everything to be put into motion. I think they could have like nixed that. But then maybe they couldn't have because like that, you know, jump starts like Kreese's ultimate redemption and it helps them move the tournament back to the valley. But I just kind of feel like maybe they could have tightened it a little bit.
I think that's fair. As I mentioned, I wasn't a huge fan of the AI of Mr. Miyagi, but
Hmm.
that's a small thing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
I guess if I were to point at anything, maybe it would be the fact that it was all happy ending.
Ooh, okay. I was going to ask you about that if you were satisfied with like where we left everything. And it's funny you mentioned that specifically because I heard that the showrunners had a couple of different ideas as to how to
Yeah,
end
I heard
things
that
and like
too.
one was darker than what we got. How would you have made it darker? Do you kind of know? Would you have had like the
No.
the hand shooting up from the water at the end, for
Yeah, I mean
example,
that's
or
one way you could have done it because
mhm.
then you don't know what the future holds for. I mean, you don't know what the future holds for anybody anyway. But what I'm saying is, then at least you're left wondering, like, okay, you have this, coming together of Cobra Kai and Miyagi Do. Johnny and Daniel are on great terms. All the kids have kind of that we've at least spent the most time with have kind of gone off in their own directions. You have Sam and Miguel who are going to Okinawa for a period of time before Miguel goes off to Stanford. Um, you have Tori and Robbie who are basically, these new social media celebrities, right? For
Mhm.
despite the fact that she knocked the teeth out of the other social media maven, but and then the Binary Brothers, I thought that was really fun. Even their license plate were binary numbers as they drove off to Caltech
Yeah.
together. So you know, maybe I've been too jaded by other series and thinking that like there needs to be a cliffhanger or there needs to be something that kind of leaves you wanting more. But that said, I I think with this series, it did its job. Like you don't always need more. You don't always need a spinoff. You don't always need another movie. That said, it looks like, there's a few other things that might be in the works and the as you were saying earlier when with some of the showrunners talking about um different endings, they also said that there could be, other opportunities in the future for some of these cast members. So I don't know what that means, but I'm sure there's a lot on the table.
Yeah, I think the obvious choice there would be Sam since she's going to Okinawa
Yeah,
and it seems like she's doing that in an effort to understand her dad and also Mr. Miyagi a little bit better. So, something following her would make a lot of sense.
sure.
Yeah. But in terms of what we have to look forward to as far as the Karate Kid franchise overall, there is a new Karate Kid movie in the works that's actually due out this summer, late May. It's called Karate Kid Legends, and Ralph Macchio is set to reprise his role as Daniel LaRusso. So we can assume that Cobra Kai lore must still apply to this, right? At
Sure.
least in terms of like Daniel's trajectory.
And Jackie Chan's in that movie too, right?
Yeah, and he was like the Mr. Miyagi to Jaden Smith's Karate
Uh
Kid, right?
I didn't see that
I didn't see it
movie.
either. I feel like we had probably both aged out of the target demo for that movie
Yeah,
when it came
that's
out.
fair.
Yeah. Would you have you seen the trailer for this though? This dropped I think around Comic-Con.
Yeah, I think I caught a bit of it. But if Daniel's son is going to be in it, I feel like I need to check it out. And I'm curious,
Okay.
there could be other cameos based on
Yeah.
Cobra Kai. Is how does it fit in the timeline? Do you know?
The official synopsis I'll read for you and anyone else who's listening is after moving to New York City with his mother, Kung Fu prodigy Li Fong struggles to let go of his past as he tries to fit in with new classmates. When a new friend needs his help, Li enters a karate competition, but his skills alone aren't enough. With the help from Mr. Han and Daniel LaRusso, he soon learns to merge two styles into one for the ultimate martial arts showdown. So it does kind of feel like like a Karate Kid origin, for example,
Mm,
if you will. But I do think it's interesting that they're setting it in New York because Daniel is originally from the East Coast, right? Isn't he from Jersey
yep.
originally? So
Yeah,
right
Jersey
across
gets
the bridge.
referenced a number of times
Yeah.
in the finale.
Yeah. So interesting that it's, it can maybe like a homecoming for him, even though like his reputation as a karate kid starts out on the West Coast in the Valley. So
Mm. We'll definitely have to check it out. And it seems like something, if folks are listening to this podcast and have enjoyed Cobra Kai, that they will enjoy the continuation of the Karate Kid series. But I do like what you said about if we do see more, that it likely would be with somebody like Sam, because of the fact that she is going overseas and she's going to a place where there's probably a lot more for us to learn and find out about Mr. Miyagi and his family. So, any other kind of last minute thoughts before we wrap up? Everybody kind of got a happy ending, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
Yeah,
Chosen.
it was nice. I know. He went back to someone else. I can't remember
Kim?
the Kim, yeah. Which was nice because, you know, he got his heart broken by Komiko and I guess he needed a fresh start. But you're right, they wrapped a lot of this up in a neat bow. But I like that they kept things open-ended with Johnny and Daniel. It's nice to kind of think of them still combining forces out there and teaching the new generation of kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there were a lot of cameos that were made in these last couple of episodes. I feel like they brought a lot of people back that we had seen in prior seasons. And then there were some new faces that were throwbacks to the Karate Kid movies, like thinking about like the referee who officiated the last few matches of the Sakai Takai. And that's what I think is just such evidence of good writing, is being able to pull those threads and to, you know, be able to have all of those people come back in one form or another. I
Yeah.
candidly, I'm not as much of a diehard fan to know like all of they usually do a very good job of like a flashback to
Yeah.
let us know, oh, this is that person. But I'm sure there were other um, people who popped up, like
Yeah.
the folks who are watching at the bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
I
could tell that they were supposed to be people that we should know.
Yeah.
But I just, yeah, I did enjoy. Yeah, I'm a big music person. That they brought back the Joe Esposito single from the original Karate Kid.
Mm-hmm.
So "You're the Best Around," which is like that's the track I think that's the track that's playing when Danny wins, and so they had to have that like in the training montage for Johnny's upcoming match. I thought was really clever, and they hadn't used it before over the course of the series, so it kind of feels like they were waiting for the right moment to slot it in to the soundtrack. So
Yeah, and
it
I
was
was
fun.
actually surprised that we didn't get any Peter Cetera "Glory of Love."
Yeah, you were talking about that last time we spoke.
Yeah, I was very surprised that it didn't make an appearance in the finale, but understandable. I actually think that, you know, funny enough, we were talking about Rocky. I believe that was also initially the song that was pitched as the theme song for Rocky,
Oh, really? That
but
makes
ended up
sense.
for Karate Kid instead.
Mm.
But yeah, this was fun. I'm sure we could talk about Cobra Kai for hours upon hours upon hours, but if listeners
Yeah.
have any suggestions about maybe some other topics that we didn't spend as much time on, some other theories or things we may have missed, definitely let us know.
Yeah, it was cool to see that so many of you were watching along with us when we released the first installment of this little series. So, like Micah said, let us know. Sound off in the comments. You can email us. You can contact us through all the other social media platforms we're on. Love to
Yeah,
hear from you.
absolutely. And don't forget to follow the show in your favorite podcast app, leave a review, and follow us on YouTube for full video episodes. And as Pam said, sound off wherever is convenient for you to let us know your thoughts and feelings on Cobra Kai. But thanks everybody for listening. That is the hype on Cobra Kai, and I feel like it's only appropriate at the end of this episode to say Cobra Kai will never die.